Hi, it's Andrew and welcome to another edition of the Performance Intelligence Podcast, the podcast about all things human performance. Optimize performance through adapting your physical, psychological, and emotional state. Craig Harper is obsessed with human behaviour, and over the past 4 decades he has worn multiple hats, including exercise scientist, personal trainer, corporate speaker, university lecturer, AFL strength and conditioning coach, business owner, and self-proclaimed bogan. Harps is host of the wildly successful podcast The You Project, and he is a true jack of all trades, speaker, author, podcaster, entrepreneur, scientist, and PhD candidate. His PhD is about how others experience you, diving into principles including metacognition, theory of mind, metaperception, and meta-accuracy. And today we've tracked the big man down to explore the practical applications of his research in our everyday lives. Craig Harper, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, buddy. That was nice. You've done a little bit of writing and prep. Look at you, like a grown-up.
I wanted to do a different intro from the normal one that everyone gets off your website. Hey, we had a lovely conversation a couple of weeks ago, you, me, Tiff, on the You Project, and that stimulated to have this discussion where at the end we said, hey, let's get you on Performance Intelligence Podcast. But I love that chat we had, mate, around purpose, passion, and also talking about all other things starting with P, potential.
Yeah, me too. I really loved it. And people maybe who don't do what we do, who don't do podcasts and stuff, might not realize how fun this is. Like for me, I had a really busy day yesterday. I got up this morning and I knew that I was talking to you today at some stage. I looked at my diary and I went, oh, awesome. Because that's for me, it's a fun hour. There's nothing about this that's like work. And like I'm 60, like you said, 4 decades. I've been doing a version of this forever, learning, growing, being the student, being the teacher, being the coach, fucking up, getting up, falling down, winning, losing, failing, succeeding, all that normal human stuff. And I'm just as excited as ever. Like genuinely, I love human potential. I love trying to understand who we are, how we are, and why we are the way we are. So,
yeah, and it shows.
Good to see you again.
It shows in your podcasting, and it's nice now, me being the podcaster and interviewing you, the talent. Rough frame, because I know you say that you're free range, loose, unscripted. I call bullshit. You're much more than the former fat kid from Maui. I've said this to you, and you get a little smile, the little lips light up. You know where I'm going. You've done 40 years of research, mate, so you've done a bit of prep. So a rough frame. I'm really curious, why did you choose the topic of how other people experience you? I want to pull on that thread. Is there a story or stories that lead to that? I've never heard you talk about that.
So full disclosure, when I started my PhD, I started looking at motivation. So what often happens with a PhD, especially in psych, is that people will start and then a month or 2 or 3 or 4 in, they're like, this is going to be a big problem, like a bigger than big problem, or there's too much already done, or you come to a realization and you take a slight left turn or you do a 180. I did a 180. So I was looking at motivation, the role of motivation in creating, change and, all that kind of general stuff. But there's just a huge amount of divergence and ambiguity around the concept of motivation in psychology. And it was probably going to be really messy. And so not that long in, probably 3 months in, I changed tact. And so as you said in the intro, I'm looking at a thing called, colloquially, we would call it the you experience, which is you, the listener, you who are listening, your ability to understand what it is like for other people to be around you, which we call metaperception. And then how good you are at that, we call that meta-accuracy. So the genesis for that was lots and lots of conversations with leaders and bosses and managers and coaches who really had no idea what it was like for their tribe, their team, their group to be around them. And I thought that was fascinating. And their understanding of themselves for the group was not the group's understanding. There was a lot of divergence, right? There was a lot of separation in the perspectives. And And the bottom line was, that there were some bosses who were in some ways really good, great business skills, knowledge, like high IQ, but at the same time, they couldn't build rapport, connection, trust, respect, because they really didn't know how the group saw them or perceived or processed them. And maybe even more importantly, they didn't seem to care. And I was always curious about that, where I would get called in to do some work with a company. And, the directive was, the culture's not great, communication's not great. It's not a great energy or environment to be in. Could you come and kind of do your thing? So I would talk to a few people, and then I would often talk to the boss, and I'm like, I found the problem. It's up in this office. It's this office up here in the corner. Here's your problem right here.
That bell end in the corner. Oh, it's you. There's the problem.
Yeah, it's Brian or Sally up in the corner office, right? So, and that, just that, and nobody's trying to be, difficult. No, that's nobody's goal. And so that just opened the door for me, mate. And I didn't even know what it was called, but I used to say to these people, what do you think it's like being around you? And honestly, most of them had never deeply thought about it.
Yeah. Or some are in total disconnect. Oh, it's freaking awesome because I'm the CEO, C-suite. So everyone must have a great time when they spend time with me. You go, actually, mate, you're a bit of a wanker. do you know that? How would you frame that? Is your research helping you not just understand it, but how to communicate that to Brian in the corner office, who's a bit of a knob and has a real disconnect between everyone else?
Look, I mean, the responses range from, fucking hell, that's interesting. I've never really thought about it. And then for some of them, there's a bit of a light bulb and a moment of self-awareness. And it's really the beginning of something. And like you said, almost at the opposite end of the scale is, well, I don't really care. I'm not here to make friends. They're here, they're paid to do a job. I'm here to tell them what to do. And it's kind of that. And I'm like, well, yes and no, but you're not employing robots, you're employing humans with emotions and feelings and, beliefs and values and expectations and a need to be respected and valued and all of those things. And so the responses were really varied. But these days, like we were chatting before we pressed the go button yesterday, I did two gigs with two different groups, two corporate groups. And I talk about this a bit as part of my presentations, depending on the focus of the presentation, of course. One of those was a 1 hour keynote. One was a 2 hour workshop. But most people are like, oh, wow, that's actually really interesting. And the way that I open the door and get people to have a little bit of an insight is I say, put up your hand if you've ever heard your voice on audio recording. And everybody goes, oh, God.
No, I hate listening to myself.
Oh, my God. And I go, all right, hands down now. Put your hand back up if you think you sound like shit. And every hand goes up. And I go, well, the bad news is that's how we hear you all the time. And it just gives people a little bit of an analogy, a little bit of a, it's like, oh, really? I go, yeah, that's the version, or that's the audible version of you that we get. So that's kind of a sample or an example for you of, the distance between your version and our version of you. Yeah. So it's a tipping off point. And I think also point out that it's not something to be worried about, but rather curious about. Like, we're not talking about, oh my God, do they like me? We're not talking about insecurity or fear or self-loathing. We're talking about, if I can understand their version of me, then perhaps I can build rapport and connection and we can work better together. We can be a better team. We can resolve conflict quicker. We can create better. We can solve problems better, so it's really about trying to create positive interpersonal and professional outcomes.
Before we jump into the research and some of your findings, because I know you've got this self-awareness pyramid, which I love. I heard you and the Irish lad, Paul Taylor. It's hard to have sort of audio subscriptions, isn't it, when you're talking to the Irish lad?
He is. Well, I've known him for a while, but yeah, he does, and especially when he talks fast.
Yeah, he's good man, PT. But question I've got for you, have you got a story or have you got a recollection of where you have shown up differently and then you got feedback down the track and you went, oh, shit, really? Is that what they thought? And I'll give you one I've had to give you some time to think of one. Sold a previous business to KPMG. Went in there as a partner, which means foreigner when you're a lateral hire. I had no idea about risk compliance, stakeholder engagement, and there's 500 other partners that all have their hands on the ship as well. And I had an amazing coach who worked with me, and she said, Andrew, you're used to being a fighter pilot and everyone is around you, putting the fuel in, right, go off the ship out in the sea. You're told when to take off, when to land, and everyone's doing everything for you. Now, Jill said, you're flying an A380 and there's 500 other people you need to share the controls with. And you come across as being too fast-paced, sometimes not listening, do your own thing, and a little bit selfish. And I went, fuck, Jesus, because I wouldn't have thought I was selfish. I would not have thought that I was too fast. But my skill set, Harps, had been so trained and worked on running a small business and being a keynote speaker where you're talking at, not talking to. The perception I had on other people's experience with me wasn't exactly the same. And then the team I had as well, we did a proper 360, not a 360 when you own it and, hey, what do you think of me? We'll go out to lunch after, but a proper independent 360. And I got similar feedback that people said they liked me, they saw the passion, but I was too pushy, and that it was very much, we're doing it this way, jump on or jump off. Also, that had been strengthened by sport. You've worked in sport. You don't actually coach in sport, you tell, because you've got a whole bunch of men and women to make the team and they're highly competitive. So that was a slap for me. It was like a big wet fish across the face, Harps, where it's like, God, I think I can communicate. And I pride myself on being caring and collegiate, but I'm coming across to some people as a bit of a knob. Shit. And it hurt. The feedback hurt.
I can understand that. But if it's true that it's better that you know it, that I know it, that we know it, right? Also, your intention, albeit good, your intention will not always be someone else's experience.
True.
Right? So my intention might be, hey, mate, I want to give you, we finish this, we wrap it up, and I want to say, hey, you're doing a great job, but can I just share a couple of thoughts with you? Right? And then all of a sudden you're like, fuck your thoughts. I don't want your thoughts. Fuck you. What? Now, I might, and by the way, I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't even think of it because you do a great job. But in this hypothetical, my intentions are good. I want to help you build a better business and brand and podcast and all that, right? So my intention in this hypothetical might be good. But your experience might be, why is he criticizing me? Why is he blah, blah, blah? So positive intention, negative experience happens all the time. So that's the first problem. That's happening constantly in business and various organizations. The second problem is that the boss or the leader or the coach doesn't know that it's happening because they just assume that other people think like them. There's this, I don't know if we spoke about it last week, but there's a thing in psychology called false consensus effect. Did we speak about that?
No, we didn't, but I've heard you talk about it.
Jot that down. So that just means that we, without thinking about it, we kind of assume that people think like us. So false consensus effect, right? And the truth is that the only person in the world who thinks like Craig Harper all the time is Craig Harper. And so I would be silly to assume that what means ABC for me means ABC for Andrew and the listeners. And so I am constantly at least aware of this idea of how do I share this thought, this idea, this message in a way that connects optimally with Andrew or with Andrew's audience. How do I do that? What does that look like? Because I'm not talking to me. And back to that thing of, I can't be objective about me because I am me. So in a way, I care more about what you think of my speaking skills than what I think, because you're more representative of the audience than I am, because you're an outsider looking in. I'm it. So this idea of, and some of the things that we need to own up to and think about, we don't like owning up to and thinking about because it means, I've got to, like you, well, maybe I am selfish or maybe I am. Or
that was the big one for me. And it was part of my evolution from being ex to in, external, exogenous, other people giving feedback, which is part self-esteem or low self-esteem, part, again, just you get so used to the external validation and you don't maybe sit and reflect, what does it mean to me? It was a huge pivotal point. And just piecing it together as I'm talking to you, not long after that, about a year, 18 months, I did a deep dive on purpose because it started to open that, oh, okay, what is this about? How do I get that nice blend between X, and you wouldn't have done the 2 gigs yesterday. You wouldn't have one of Australia's leading podcasts if you didn't have people connecting with your message, following and liking. So you do need that, but you've got to marry that. And I think that's that authenticity I see you've got. You rock up, you're comfortable who you are. Hey, take it or leave it. This is me. But you've got that nice dance between the two. So it's inner, and there's a real drive and purpose and connection, but you're connecting with others. So back to that question, have you had an experience like me where you thought you were showing up in one way and you got feedback that was really disconnected to how you thought you were connecting or showing up?
Yeah, many times. But the one that is the standout for me, which was the stepping off point for having this other awareness, was when back in the day, I used to lecture what in Victoria are called VicFit courses. So teaching Cert 3 and Cert 4 would-be personal trainers and gym instructors. And one of the reasonably consistent bits of feedback that came in with the feedback forms that all the students would fill out is that, mostly Craig's not terrible. We like him. He's a bit funny. He's da-da-da. But probably about 1 in 10 said something like, he's intimidating. And I'm like, who fucking said that? What are their names? Where are they? Give me their addresses.
You stand up the front of the class next time. All right, some of you fucking bastards have said I'm intimidating. Stand up right now.
Yeah, get up here. And I'm like, I don't know what anyone means. But it was, of course, it was, they had every right to say that. And clearly for a percentage of the people, I was.
And just for context, for people listening to this, and you can follow this on YouTube now as well, the Performance Intelligence Podcast. See what I did there, mate? Just got a nice little YouTube plug. But when I first met you, 25 years ago, you were seriously jacked. So you were the gym junkie, right? You owned Australia's biggest, I think Southern Hemisphere's biggest personal training studio. So you were the weights guy. Like you had biceps on biceps. So I'm imagining back then you'd have your happy pants, your weightlifter pants, you'd have your boots or shoes, a tight T-shirt that's probably a couple of sizes too short because you got the pecs and got the delts. So physically you would have been quite intimidating.
Yeah, I was. I probably was. I was probably, well, to put it in context, I'm 5'10"-ish and I'm about 85 kilos. Then I was probably about 105 and maybe leaner than I am now. So muscles on my eyelids and all of that, and probably mildly happy with myself if I'm being self-aware and all of that. But I didn't, it wasn't my intention. Like nothing in me had that as a goal to be intimidating. But the bottom line was that I was to some people. And so I had to think about that. I had to lean into that and try to understand what I was doing and how I was being that created that impact or effect for some. And of course you can't control everyone's response, but that was good for me because, and since then I've kind of I realized that I am, even 40 years later, I'm a work in progress. I get trapped in ego. I'm insecure at times. I have imposter syndrome at times still. All of those normal human things. But I think, what is good is somebody in your position who you are a leader, you have followers, you stand in front of groups, so do I, all of this. But I think when you genuinely, not disingenuously, but when you genuinely talk about your own bullshit and your own fuck ups and your own idiosyncrasies and your own insecurity and your own fear, while also sharing some strategies and stories and techniques that might help people think, do, be better, people value that more and trust you more because you're not some fucking guru pontificating from a stage who's living this flawless, perfect existence in this perfect marriage with these perfect fucking genetics.
Bullshit! There's some
come on,
stuff
bro.
behind.
That's and so for me, there's a lot of similar models to this, but I put people into kind of or our different selves into 5 categories. The first is public you. these are self-explanatory, then personal you, then private you, then secret you, then future you, the you that you want to be.
Ooh, I like that.
So personal, public you is the one that everyone sees. There's no real filter. You know, you'll let that version of you connect with the world and the world see that version of you. Then there's kind of personal you, which is more, you know, family, friends, maybe 5 to 10 people get personal you. And then private you might be your partner or your mum or your sister or somebody, 1 or 2 maybe, that are very close and pretty much know everything. Then secret you, that's just you. That's the shit that you're telling no one, the feelings that you're sharing, the insecurity that you. And then future you is, or potential you is who I might want to be and who I might want to become. And I try as much as possible to share private me with the world, like the stuff that most people wouldn't, the stuff that I'm genuinely scared of, the stuff that I think I might do well or poorly, my own insecurity, my own, you know, the space between my values and my behavior. Am I a great role model? No. Should you be like me? No. But I try to be less performative than I used to be. You know, I know that. See, you and I know this, right? As a speaker, and people who don't do this job might not think about this, but as a speaker, I know that I've got pretty good skills. I've got lots of miles on the clock. I have pretty good situational and social and public awareness in that context. And I know that I can walk out on a stage, do my job, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, skills, blah, 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 tell the stories, you know, share the messages. Thanks very much. I'm Craig Harper. You're all fucking awesome. Yay. There's that. And that ain't terrible, but for me, that's more choreographed, scripted, and performative. But the stuff that blows me away and people away, and it's not about Craig Harper, but is when you get beyond that show and you start to create a level of emotional, psychological, sociological, maybe even, who knows, spiritual connection that's got nothing to do with any performance or script or plan. You're just raw and you're just in the moment. And, you know, not that they're bad, but I don't use videos or slides, or I just get up and see where we go. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's fucking amazing. And as you and I have said before, the amazing's got nothing to do with me. I'm just a conduit to the amazing. And that sounds like bullshit and people go, but there's stuff that's happened in my own workshops and seminars that I can't even explain, but something happens.
And for context, you said this before we went on, you're still banging out about 100 presentations a year. So you're not like one of those people that does 2 keynotes and has all over their website. International keynote speaker, as seen on the stage back in 1984 when we both had long hair. So you're doing a lot.
Yeah.
Couple of themes. One is it's this awareness when you move from denial. We often say that river floating in Egypt. So I was in denial about some of those habits and behaviours, often linked to not low self-esteem, but absolutely not confidence, where you can be there in your own skin. So that was a big shift for me. And I can hear that's happened with you from the Vic Fit and other examples. But when I listen to you, when I catch up with you, I've seen you present a few times as well, you're really authentic. There would be a bunch of people here listening who are shit scared going, I can't let people know the private me. God, I'm not going there, let alone the personal me, because I've been taught, my leaders said, all right, young fella, young lady, when you turn up, leave your shoes and your personality at the door. And when you're working for this bank, consulting firm, telco, insert government organisation, you've got to be the job description of the role. We don't want your personal shit. Now, that's changed a lot, thank goodness. But it's authenticity rather than the, hey, now let me be authentic with you. I don't think I've shared this story with you. A guy that I used to work with, lovely guy, leads a big group. And he said, Maisie, can you come and watch me speak? I'm speaking at our open forum, town hall, and I want you to help me because you do good speaking and stuff. So I'm watching him and he started a bit nervous, a bit dry, and then he opened his arms and I think he'd listened to Brené Brown. He said, now let me be authentic with you. And I felt like saying, now let me kick you in the balls. God, don't say to people, let me be authentic. You be authentic. You do authentic. I see you do that beautifully. I see some people now, they do it and I feel like I need a shower.
Well, if it's choreographed, it's not fucking authentic. So it's like, fake authenticity. And I think letting people see your your metaphoric warts is cool. It's the space between persona and person. Persona. This is me. Hey, and this is me. This is me just talking, sharing. And I think, look, if I'm honest, there's always going to be a little bit of something performative because I'm a bit of a performer. Like I love fucking making people laugh. I love telling stories. I love manipulating the crowd in a good way, but then woven through that is vulnerability and a bit of pain and a bit of embarrassing stuff and a real insight into a real human experience that isn't always shiny and beautiful. But I think, that's the thing of trying to create this synergy and symphony of messages and entertainment and connection. Because the other thing too is like what people don't think about, you could get on stage or I could get on stage and we could share what is the most mind-blowing information of all time with no nuance, with no story, with no peaks and troughs, with no humor, with no and not only does it not have a good impact, it has a terrible impact, and you and I never get any more work.
You've got to have a bit of jazz hands, Harps. Got to have some jazz hands. But if you've got too much jazz hands, you don't get booked to do the jazz. It's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? This porridge is just right. And that's a skill to adapt that to an audience as well.
Well, it's a real challenge because when you start, as you know, like firstly, when I started, I was fucking terrible. It's so bad. But you can't get good at what you're not doing, right? You can't get better at the thing that you won't do, and you can't get better at the thing that you won't acknowledge. Hey, Craig, you're intimidating. No, I'm not. Fuck off. Right?
Who fucking said that?
Yeah, right. So I can't get better at being less intimidating, or at least trying to. Unless I first go, oh, okay, cool, thank you, I'm aware now. So I need to lean into that. But, this whole, I feel, I probably sound old when I say this, but I feel like a lot of people are very impatient now. It's almost like they want 10 years worth of experience in a year.
Oh, we want a hack. Like, download it, mate. Can you give me the Craig Harper, The You Project hack? What do you mean? You've been spending 40 years, trial, tribulation, triumph, stuff up, setbacks, and you've got this experience. Mate, can you give that to me in a download? No, you can't get it in a download. That's a huge problem I see with my kids. You and I, little Craig, little Andrew, used to go to the library. So for people listening, there's this thing that they used to have in councils where you'd have books, Wiz. They used to have real books where you go there and you'd put your name and you'd wait for a book. But at Glendenhurst, where I grew up, James Collard, great kid, James, real nerd, but he was always the first to get the book. So, Harps, I'd have to wait 2 weeks to do my geography assignment. Can you imagine saying that to a kid now? Wait 2 weeks until you go get the books. They'd go, no, I'll just download it off the internet. So that's part societal.
Yeah. I do some coaching with a young guy called Brad, who's a jiu-jitsu black belt. And arguably jiu-jitsu is the hardest martial art in the world to get a black belt in. It takes, if you're consistent and you start today and you've got some talent, it'll take you about 10 years, right? So it's not one of these martial arts where you start on Monday and by Wednesday week, you're a black belt, right? And I was talking to him I said to him, if I started now, when would I get my black belt if I went 3-4 days a week and I'm 60? He said, well, you might never get it. Let's say that. I'm like, okay, thank you. And then he said, but probably, if your body didn't fall apart, 10 to 15 years. I'm like, fuck, really? He's like, yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's why they're held in really high regard. He's a 2nd or 3rd Dan black belt.
They've earned it. Totally.
It took him, and he's good at it. It took him a decade to get his black belt, right? And he's good. He's a natural. But this is the thing, is that whatever we do, whatever we're doing for the first time, we're a white belt. And the journey of getting, metaphorically strangled and choked and tapped and kicked in the dick and punched in the face and all of those things, this is the journey. And also, not only is that the journey, that's the practical reality of becoming good or mastery or high performance or human optimization or whatever you want to call it. But not only is the outcome then worth it, it's the journey that is the real value, because the journey changes you. You know, the thing that we want in our culture, which is we want success. Nobody wants to be a failure. Of course, success means different things to different people, and nobody wants to be a dud. Nobody wants to be unhealthy. Nobody wants to be broke. Nobody wants to be unpopular. Nobody wants to fail, but also nobody wants to be uncomfortable. Well, guess what? If you're not at least prepared to get uncomfortable on a semi-regular basis, that growth, that learning, that adaptation, that improvement, that high performance, it's unlikely.
And thank goodness we've got research now around post-traumatic growth, because everyone was saying, oh, stress will break you. But there's a whole bunch of people that go through high levels of stress, even trauma, and they grow and they flourish. So we're seeing more research come out of that from, especially Martin Seligman started that with the US military. Hey, on the research frame, because we could talk stories and experience, but there's a real rigor to what you do, which I love as well. So you can tell us a little bit about the self-awareness pyramid. And so is that something you've come up with, or have you adapted Maslow, Bloom's taxonomy? I'm thinking of a whole bunch of other frameworks.
Look, I could make that. There could be lots of different layers to that. I developed that, but obviously all of those terms are not my terms. It's just a way, like I kind of developed this simple pyramid to get people to understand, my stuff quite easily. I've got a really good little graphic that I will send you that you might want to use that
we'll put that on the show notes.
Yeah. Anyway, so in this pyramid, at the bottom of the pyramid, so there's 4 levels. The bottom of the pyramid is what's called metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. And, the truth is that most people don't think about how they think very often, if at all. They just think and they believe their thoughts, and those thoughts become beliefs. And also the idea of thinking about the origin of the way that my mind works. Like, why do I think and distill information and see the world the way that I do? What is the lens, or what is the window through which I view and understand and process the world? What are the things that create my window? So like beliefs, values, ideas, experiences, bias, faith, prejudice, like all of those things which we all have to some extent, that kind of forms the window through which I view the world. So if I'm a vegan, I'm going to look at the world a certain way. If I'm a Catholic, so too. If I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu and some guy's coming up to me, I might view that quite differently to if I'd never done any kind of self-defense. And so, I'm an only child who grew up in a Catholic family. I was a morbidly obese child. I went to only Catholic schools. I grew up in rural Victoria. So all of these things are variables that shape or inform my thinking. So but one of the biggest challenges for us in this journey towards what we might call greater self-awareness or even consciousness is to become aware of our lack of awareness. It's like I become more conscious when I recognize my lack of consciousness. And by that, I mean the autopilotness of our existence.
Which is the way we live now. We just wake up and we grab the weapon of mass distraction and we scroll and we go to meeting after meeting. It is Groundhog Day. It's such a good metaphor. Pensacola Phil, you just wake up and before you realise, you wake up, I've heard you say 5 years later. It's not 5 for a lot of people. It's 10, 20, 30. Jesus, I've got to the end of my career. My kids are now having kids. I'm not really connected with them because I've just been on this conveyor belt for years and years. And then it often takes a crisis, a relationship breakdown, losing a job, a big life event. That can sometimes shift, but if people don't have enough pain, so they're comfortably uncomfortable, it's like just the tapping of a wall. You tap, 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 the wall doesn't crumble. 30 years later, it's one tap and the whole gyprock comes tumbling down. 100%. Because that no self-awareness and just flying through life on autopilot.
So let's summarize that into 4 or 5 words. Don't wait for the catastrophe. I mean, this is what we do. We wait till shit breaks and then we go, oh, I should get in shape. Oh, I should be nicer to my wife. Oh, I should, or whatever it is. And so, that's about being proactive, not reactive. And leaning into that a little bit. So that's understanding that, we've all been programmed and conditioned, and recognizing where my programming, my cognitive, behavioral, emotional, psychological programming ends, and where me, Craig Harper, the clean slate, where do I start? Who am I beyond that? Like beyond my programming, conditioning, beliefs, and various kind of set ideas and ideals and ideology, like who am I beyond that? For me, that's a really curious kind of exploration.
And thoughts are not facts. That's something I find people really connect with. When you go, okay, you think the way you think. Let's talk about thinking about the way you think. And you get some really weird looks. Like, shit, what, metacognition? What's that shit? I just think, champ. Thoughts are not facts. And on your mobile phone, I've asked Wizard this, and he's on Android. So he said Android are just better, so there's no answer to this story. But if you've got an iPhone, you regularly have to do an iOS upgrade. And the people Harp's going through decades on autopilot. They just wake up, they're grey. They're a monochrome version of grey. Grey clothes, grey car, grey skin, grey hair if they've got any, grey life, because there's no thinking about, hey, how can I challenge this, or what can I upgrade? So I love that whole notion of the regular iOS upgrade. And you've heard me bang on about this. Do you want your body to be stronger, fitter, faster, more flexible? You got to do reps and sets. So it's exactly the same with your thinking. Get out of that laziness or that comfort zone.
I think it's really difficult at times to be objective about the thing you're in the middle of, if not impossible to be objective about the thing that you're in the middle of. And what we're all in the middle of is our own life, right? And that is why it is easy to close your eyes, then open them again, and it's a year later, and you've blinked. And that's why it's very easy to keep doing things that don't really work, because they're habitual, they're programmed. And so this is not an easy idea. This is an idea, though. It's not an easy do, but it's an easy idea. It's just a construct. But the idea is to find a way to be able to do an inventory or a stock take on your own existence. And so the question that I ask people, individuals and audiences all the time is, what's not working? Like, what's the thing that you're doing that doesn't work? What's the thing that you're doing with your body that doesn't work? What's the thing that you're doing with your kids, your parenting, your relationships that doesn't work? What's the thing that you do with money that's fucking stupid, but you still keep doing it? Like on planet you are always getting data. You're always getting information. Now, the challenge in the middle of the mayhem and the chaos that is the continuity and the never-endingness of our existence, the challenge is to be able to hit the metaphoric pause button and say, okay, if I continue on my current trajectory of habits and thinking, beliefs and behaviors and outcomes, if I continue on this trajectory, will my life be better or worse in a year, 2 or 5? The answer for many of us is worse. Okay, that's not self-loathing, that's awareness. Now, what to do with the awareness? Okay, easier said than done, but how do I shift this? How do I get out of this groove, this pattern, this behavior that is more self-sabotage than self-serve? How do I do that? And so, we think about building a business, our best business or our best brand or our best bank balance. Even we think about how would we build a house if we're starting from scratch. You would spend a year designing and developing and finding the land and colors and fittings and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to building our best...
Just on that, you're so right. Graphic simulation, so you've got all these different designs. What do you think? We'll go to a different show. We'll go to the trade warehouses. People spend hours, days, weeks, months planning a rebuild of a house, which they might be in for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. And then you say, well, what's more important, your life or your house? And people go, what a stupid question. Well, of course, my life. I go, what?
I was going to say the house. Shit, you set up question.
you spent a year designing your house, but you won't spend a week designing your optimal life, And again, not trying to be critical, but just... here's the thing. None of us are going to accidentally end up succeeding. It's so easy to live an unconscious Groundhog Day existence, and it takes courage and it takes effort and energy and probably a bit of discipline, self-control and discomfort, which are not very sexy things in 2024. But, that's just what's required. And I always say I can tell you what you want to hear or the truth to an audience. And I go, what do you want? And they're like, oh, I guess the truth.
It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt.
Oh, all right.
So metacognition is the base. Theory of
so
mind.
Metacognition, yep. Theory of mind is essentially our ability to understand or try to understand or be curious about how other people think.
Which you're not going to get, my assumption, unless you understand yourself first. Then you can understand others. So hence the framework.
And also being able to, in real time, realise that Andrew and I are in the same conversation, but not the same experience. And then with that in mind, what is Andrew's experience right now? What is Andrew's version of me? What is Andrew's version of or story about this conversation, this moment in time? What is his story about this interaction? And these are questions that we ask not because we necessarily have to agree with the other person or endorse the other person or, let's be honest, even like the other person, because in some situations we're going to work with people we don't really warm to. That doesn't make us terrible. It makes us human. But the point is not to align or connect or endorse or agree, but rather to understand. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. So me trying to understand, and I've worked with many people that are so not like me, not better or worse, just different. But everything from, the military and Victoria Police to blokes in prison to addicts to alcoholics to the general public to people with all kinds of abilities and disabilities. And in the middle of that, I'm just trying to understand them so I can work with them or help them or support them. So that's theory of mind.
I'm going deep at the moment on mindfulness. I used to think mindfulness was a crock of shit. I think because I'd watched the wrong videos where you have this Yahweh prophet in the modern age walking in robes, just talking absolute bullshit, making it sound like this all-encompassing, just every part of your life. But when you look at the definition of mindfulness, you go back to the Japanese samurais 2,500 years ago, similar time yogis were starting to come up with similar principles. It's about being present in the moment without judgment. So if you're on your mobile phone scrolling all the time, if you're on autopilot through the decades, there is no mindfulness. It's the opposite. It's mindlessness, and it's often driven by distraction. So I'm really curious, have you looked at that thread of mindfulness? Because as you're saying, a lot of that about both my self-awareness, so that metacognition, and then other people, just being able to drop into that mindful state, being present in the moment without judgment. Where does the mindfulness research sit in with this?
Yeah, so for me, mindfulness it's sometimes almost better called mindlessness. So, or mind emptiness, because in a way you're trying to get out of your mind, you're trying to get out of thought in a way, and to be the kind of the mind fuck, no pun intended, but is because we're trying to understand the mind using the mind as the tool that we're trying to understand itself with, right? It's like I'm analyzing the mind with my mind. Oh, great. How's that going? But yes, I trying to turn down the chaos, trying to be the calm in the chaos. That Eastern philosophical construct of equanimity is being able to be in the busyness and the mayhem, but without being chaotic or without being busy myself. And for me, that's been a real journey too, because my mind is busy mind, not so much an overthinking mind, because that tends to be more fear-driven, but
busy creative mind.
Busy creative, busy, solving problems, coming up with ideas. And, yesterday on the way back from Sydney to Melbourne, I just had my notes open in my phone. So just basically writing stuff electronically. And I literally came up with about 5 potential ideas, new ideas for new things that I definitely don't have time to do. But I just put them with this collection of ideas and thoughts that I have that I might, open the door on one day.
Well, that's a technique in itself. And my iPhone's got multiple notes and layers and folders. And the science behind this is if you don't distill what's in your mind and put it onto paper or put it onto your digital format, it just circles around. So you're distracted, and it's a bit like Homer Simpson with the monkey and the symbol doing the backflip. So metacognition, got it. Theory of mind, having more of an awareness of others. Then we go up. Yep. The next layer?
So up the next one, which is what we've already covered to some extent, metaperception is what's it like being around me? And again, this comes from a space of, or a place of wanting to be able to create better interactions with others, to be a better leader, communicator, teacher, employer, employee, athlete, so that whoever it is that I'm interacting with, that I'm working alongside, that I can understand or have some insight into what it's like being around me, just so that we have better communication, we have better rapport, we have better connection. We can, in work situations, figure things out, solve problems, resolve conflict, agree to disagree. I've got lots of friends who don't have a lot of the same beliefs that I have around certain things, but my friendship with them and my love for them is not conditional upon them thinking like me. If that were the case, I'd be living in an echo chamber, or confirmation bias, we call it. And I'd only pay attention to people who sound like me, believe like me, and think like me, which would make me, one, an egomaniac, and two, pretty lonely, or essentially a cult member.
I don't think we have a lot of cult members on this. We might have one or two. So majority of this audience aren't in cults and have not been a cult member.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, there are lots of cults of thought, though. You can identify
what's a cult? Okay.
You can identify a cult of thought online very easy, and the irony is, or I guess, and this is true for me too. So I'm not saying, hey, I've figured this out, nobody else has. I have to be really prepared to hold on to my beliefs loosely, because you think about beliefs and ideas that they are intertwined with who we are. Then now my identity is tied into being right about that thing. Now, when I truly believe that when it comes to this issue or this question or this topic, the thing that I think is right, therefore everyone else in the world who disagrees with me on this is wrong. That's kind of a dangerous position to have. And so, I grew up, as we've spoken many times, in a very religious household, and subsequent to that, went and did a whole lot of other stuff in a different version of the same religion. So I spent a lot of my life reading the Bible, being philosophically theological, and so I have a very specific background and training and programming, and over the years, relationships and all of this stuff that I was fully immersed in. And now, all of these years later, what I have to say anyway, based on how I now see the world and see myself in the world, is that the truth is, I don't know. And people don't like saying I don't know, but is there a God? I don't know. Is there a eternity as we understand it in the Christian sense? I don't know. Is the Bible, really the inspired word of God? I don't know. But I can think things and believe things, but also I have to be courageous and say, this is what I think. This is even what I believe, but could I be wrong? Yes, I could be. Could I be wrong? Yep.
Or did they let you into the monastery saying fuck in your sermon?
No. Well, this is the thing.
Did you swear back then?
No.
You dropped the F-bomb a lot. And I even noticed on the podcast I did with you,
yes,
my fuck ratio went up.
Yeah, of course.
Now, you need to listen to the background to that. If you just do a bite size, my fuck ratio went up. That might go off on the internet. But because, it's just you being authentic. So I can't imagine you were swearing at that age.
No. So this is, nobody needs to know this, but Catholic Church, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I had all of these people coming into my life constantly telling me that, and this is not even from within my circle, but God's got his hand on your life, whatever that means. God's got a purpose for you, all these things. Anyway, through a range of really kind of weird and wacky, from the outside looking in, weird and wacky events, I ended up going to what was essentially a fundamental Christian church. And, I was, for want of a better term, balls deep. I went to that church for about 4 years, and I was 19 to 23, maybe 4 or 5 years. And honestly, most of it was good in that I learned about, humility and purpose and a whole lot of things that I needed to learn. And, I definitely didn't master anything, but I was a pretty good student because I was genuinely curious about all of that. But one of the byproducts of that is, so for 5 years, I didn't have sex. I didn't swear. I lived a very monastic, disciplined life.
And that's your late teens, early 20s, like that's where people literally come alive. Hormones are pulsing through your body and with other people you're around. That's really
100%.
that passage to adulthood.
Yeah, well, I was engaged to a woman I never slept with. I had a girlfriend who became my fiance within the church, and I was with her. We didn't get married, obviously. I pulled the pin on that, which was, the right thing to do, but also for her, the right thing to do. She dodged a bullet. Fuck, imagine marrying me. But that would have been a nightmare for her. So that worked out well. She married somebody and is living happily ever after, which is nice. But for me, that was what was required.
I had no idea about that part of your life. Do you talk about that normally, that part?
Yeah, very, very committed. Yeah, whenever. It's just not that relevant that often. But my point is that, like, I grew up in a very specific model of thinking and believing and faith and behavior, right? And you are programmed. I chose it all, but at the same time, you can't question much, because if you question too much, you're out of the group. Like, it is very much
borderline indoctrination.
Well, it was the church I was in was quite culty, right? And so it is very much an echo chamber of thinking and believing. The truth is, in cults, be they food cults, religious cults, political cults, sporting cults, cults of ideology, any ideology, you are not encouraged to question the doctrine. You are discouraged. And not only are you discouraged from thinking critically, you are criticized and you are cast out into the metaphoric darkness. And so this is the problem that I have with any of these ideological cults of thought.
Is that one of the reasons, if I pull on that thread, one of the reasons why you're so passionate about human behaviour and connection and people having a voice and diversity, because you had that block of life that wasn't? Is that something you've reflected on and looked back? Is that
that is true. And there were questions that kept coming up for me in that time, which I was told, I'll tell you what I was told. I was told that's the devil. That's Satan trying to undermine God in your life and all of these things. And I'm like, oh, well, that kind of, but the thing is also what people who are, and I'm not saying that there was any sinister agenda. I think all of the people, they actually believed it and meant well, right? But, there are certain people who can say pretty much anything and back it up biblically. And this might sound weird to some of your listeners, but in certain environments, you can make pretty much anything sound reasonable with the right scripture if you're talking to a vulnerable person, And so for me, I wanted to go deeper than just thought. I wanted to open a spiritual door. I wanted to see what was there, what was beyond the cognitive curtain. And the thing is that, this is maybe another day, but you think about when we open that door and we kind of think about what is, and this is getting out of the psychology and the cognition space, of course, but even there, is there such a thing as a spiritual world? What does that even mean? And there's so many things that we will experience in a lifetime that don't make sense, in inverted commas, in psychology. And so we go, well, that's bullshit. That's not real. Maybe it's not real. Maybe it is real. Maybe we just can't understand it with our understanding, like with our frame of reference, with our version of what is real and what is not.
This is what I love about a podcast, and you've taught me this too. I don't rock up. I would get anxiety rocking up with no script, but I've gone from having question 1, answer question 2, which is a bit like a tennis game, to I've got a running sheet here, and as I said at the start, 3 sort of loose areas. Number 1, why are you so passionate about this topic? Number 2, let's dig into the science. And we've done that. Metacognition at the base, theory of mind, metaperception, and meta-accuracy. I've got a question on meta-accuracy to wrap up. And then 3, I wanted to talk to you about transitions. But I had no idea we'd talk about that. And I understand a lot more about you and what has driven you to do this. So thank you for sharing all that.
Pleasure. I spent a long time studying and reading the Bible. You would not believe how many scriptures I could recite, which nobody needs to hear. But yeah, like I studied it like somebody would study a PhD for years. Every day pray, every day quiet time, every day read, every day study, every day. every day.
There's a lot of good in prayer. And with the Pacific boys, I told you this when we caught up last time. So NRL now is 54, nearly 55% Pacific or Indigenous, a much larger Pacific population. And when I was putting together a framework at the start of the year, so we talk about being in that peak performance zone, inverted U. If you're feeling a bit tired or fatigued, you add some fire. If you're feeling a little bit too revved up, you add some ice. So I put this nice model together. As you know, working with sporting teams, mate, you've got to have a science base or an evidence base, but keep it simple so the boys and the girls understand it. So we were doing all this work around fire and ice. It was really landing. What do you do to upregulate? What do you do to downregulate? And then one of the players came up and said, Maisie, where's prayer? I'm like, how remiss of me. So we've added prayer because prayer can be meditative and it can be calming effect, or prayer can be tapping into purpose or a higher power to add a bit of heartbeat and to add a bit of fire as well. So just rounding that out for a lot of people who do listen. Obviously we're talking about extreme, but a lot of people will do prayer. And I say this to a lot of my Pacific boys. They go, I find it hard to meditate or do mindfulness. You go to church every Sunday? Yeah. Just drop into being present in the moment and connect with your heart rate and just think about other stuff and just be in the moment without judgment. Now, transitions. Do you consciously transition from one thing to the next? Because when I look at your job description, it's pretty similar to mine. You'll go from a podcast to a meeting about a future project or a book, and then you go to lots of workshops and you've got your hands in lots of different things. Do you have a process where you transition in and transition out? Because when I look at that model, that whole meta-accuracy, I can't help but think there's something you do either naturally or it's just started the process way, way, way back to transition and to actually think, how do I transition into this group and how do I show up authentically but for what they need?
I mean, I don't have any set transition kind of process, but I be aware, I think about who I'm going to be with and why I'm going to be there and what I want to create in the time that I'm with that person or those people in that situation. Like, what's my reason for being there? Why do they want me there? As long as I show up knowing why I'm there and what are like yesterday I told you I did a real estate industry conference in Manly. And I had basically quite a brief, so to speak, from the organisers. And, I could go wherever I wanted as long as I was talking around that subject. And and then I had a different brief for the gig that I did in the afternoon. But as long as I stay in that domain, then I'm okay. But I don't have any big kind of preparation process or, and I think because I've been doing it for so long and talking for so long, I try not to open doors that I'm not really knowledgeable about or qualified in, because it's just, if I don't know a fair bit about it or understand it, then I shouldn't be talking about it. But yeah, I find it quite easy to transition from podcast to speaking gig to coaching session to, whatever, because for me, it's all just talking.
Is that though... I love that model you said before about the public you, the personal you, the private you, the secret you and potential you.
Yeah.
I can't help but think if someone is very public when they transition from one thing to the next, it is a persona. And I openly say that I have a persona when I'm on a big stage. You've got to bring a bit of the jazz hands.
Yeah.
But I think what you're helping me understand today. I
love that.
You love the jazz hands?
You need to call this episode something like jazz hands and metaperception or something.
Jesus, jazz hands and 5 years with no jizz.
Yeah. Jesus, jazz hands and a jizzless existence.
Where was I? Just cracking myself up at my own jokes. I'm doing harp jokes on my podcast.
The other thing about 5 years with no jizz, there really was 5 years with no jizz, because the other way that jizz happens, that wasn't endorsed either. So
I think that's a whole different podcast in itself.
Yeah, there's something nobody needs to think about.
We've waited to almost the 60-minute mark and people are just
somebody's just choked on their yogurt, haven't they?
All right, let's go back to what I was talking about. But that,
why have you gone red, mate? What's going on? Why do you look so uncomfortable? Do you need a glass of water or something? You all right?
I don't know whether we've sort of gone to the secret or private. We're sort of dancing between the two harps. Love the authenticity, mate. But that public face.
Love the authenticity, but stop.
no, mate. We're talking about self-awareness and metacognition. And you're showing a really good example. It actually is a good example. That you said that before, and I said, open the window. You go, all right, big fella, bang, here it is. No whacking off for 5 years. Take that in your face.
You're welcome, world.
But I just see there's almost no delineation between that for you. So you're showing us even in this conversation. And so from an energy shift, you don't need to shift energy because you're doing what's authentic, you're doing what fuels you. So you can be personal, private, in public. So there isn't a real need to ramp up. So I'm just trying to catch up with that because I still teach. It's really important for corporates, especially before they go into a meeting, to transition, because some matter more, performance moments. And I'll always go through a framework, 3 questions, and it's very much sport and military influenced. Number 1, who's in the room? 2, what's the context? Number 3, what does success look like? If you can ask those 3 questions before every meeting, podcast, performance moment, you do pretty well. What we miss, though, a lot of people come out of that straight into the next thing. It's a little bit of a look back in the rearview mirror, 3 more questions. What worked, what didn't, what can we improve next time? So you're sort of rolling between these performance moments.
Yes. Look, I mean, definitely I prepare in the sense that I'm well aware who I'm talking with and talking for and the outcomes that I want to create. But I try to bring that very comfortable energy to, there's not so much rah-rah, and that works for me. But I think what's really important to say here too is that, so for anyone who is thinking about whether or not it's doing having your own podcast or becoming a presenter or a professional speaker or a coach, or the way that Andrew does it and the way that I do it, that's just the way that we do it. That's not the best way. That's what works for us. And I think that just like, we don't say what's the best diet. We say what's the best diet for you based on, your body, your training, your age, your genetic disposition, all of that, So it's trying to find in the middle of all of this, I've worked with other speakers who are so different to me, but amazing. But I couldn't do what they do because I would be faking it.
And they couldn't do what you do either. So flip side, because you're in your lane.
And so it's not like, the Craig Harper way is the way. No, that's the way for me. It's like I do lots of things I do that work for me that I would not recommend for others because nobody is me but me. If I share kind of a revelation about how I do something and somebody wants to give that a go, that's fine, but there's no guarantee. It's like I decided when I was 21 or 2, I didn't want to have a job per se. I wanted to work for me. I didn't want a boss. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to sit in a cubicle. I didn't want to wear a suit. I figured out all of these things I didn't want to do. And I'm like, well, what's the antidote to that? Well, the antidote is that I figure out how I can build something that's a synergy of making dough and having fun and learning and evolving and working with humans. And that's kind of what I did. But I've spent 34 years not having holiday pay, not having sick pay, not having any guarantees, not knowing what I would make next month, not, a whole lot of vulnerability and exposure that most people would not like at all. But I thrive in that. That's my jam. I love that shit. But again, I wouldn't recommend it. It's just like I eat 2 meals a day because that works for me, but it's not something I would recommend to people. So I think, even with these podcasts, lean in and listen and see what resonates. And then maybe if something resonates, take that for a test drive and see what the outcome is, because it's different things work for different people.
Just go back to one open loop. There's many. I'll close one and then we'll start to bring this baby home. On the speaking, I've seen, and I know you've seen as well, there's certain speakers who you see them and they're on stage and it's a wonderful show. It really is persona. And you watch it and go, oh, wonderful choreography. Look up and the music starts, or fade left, fade right and tell the story. And it's, where I'm going with this, we're probably thinking of some similar speakers you see and you go, oh, that was awesome. And then you see them the second time and go, where's you? Yeah. So for people listening to this, I think you're the extreme with respect on just free range, but you've done loads of fucking work, mate, decades and decades. So you can rock up and you are the you project. It's you. And it's that beautiful blend, public, personal, private, a little bit of secret every now and then, but it's the narrative you're happy with. We see some other people are so choreographed, probably so uncomfortable with the real them, that they put on this persona and mask, and that's draining. It really is draining. So I think for people listening to this, just think, where are you on that spectrum when you show up? Are you putting on the mask? Are you the Phantom of the Opera every single time? Or are you just rocking up as you? Probably for most people, they're somewhere in the middle. And I think, well, one of the lessons for me in this discussion with you, mate, is about, well, where am I happy being? And you've said this on your podcast when you've interviewed me. I'll do a bit more prep and I'm a bit more jazz handy on that stuff as well. But I found a laneway that suits me, and it's taken a while. And I love the feedback you gave me before, and I felt it the last podcast we did. I felt we really connected. We did one a couple of years ago. I think I was more jazz hands sort of speaking at as well. So as you get more comfortable in yourself, I think it's just, it's energy fueling rather than energy draining. So that's a real takeout from this conversation.
Yeah, but and I'm not pissing in your pocket, but you're great. And what is interesting is that, I don't know how old you are. How old are you? 50 or something?
Yeah, 51.
I mean, this is interesting because you are getting better. Not like, oh, you're just hanging in there. And I'm not saying this to pump you up in front of your audience, but the you that I've known over the decades, you're better. Your skills are better. Your understanding, your awareness, your self-awareness, the way that you communicate, the way that you frame things and structure things and tell stories, it's like you're better. And what's great is that at 51, you're still growing and learning. At 60, I'm still growing and learning. Like, this is not normal, but fuck normal, fuck typical. Like, and it's not about that we've got to be, this endless pursuit of excellence. But, I know that if I can keep learning, evolving, growing while enjoying the journey and being me and still having a degree of contentment and calm, but also side by side with still a little ambition, then why not,
So two things of that. One, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that. It means a lot coming from you. And I was going to make a flippant joke, and that's the Dubbo boy, me coming out going, he's giving me feedback. I've got to be a bit of a dick and not take it. But I'm going to sit in it and say thank you for someone I've looked up to for years and someone who's had a big influence on my life, you. I really appreciate that. And secondly, why not at 51 or 61 or 71, or if someone's listening to this and you're 21, why not be in a stage of constant growth? And if we're going to get to 100, which I want to, I'm halfway there. And I just think on the mental skills side of my business, working with sporting teams and literally having the opportunity to work with great men and great women around the world now, Harps, I'm fucking loving it. But I'm just scratching the surface, mate. And I really can see in 5 years and even 10 years, I'm going to have so much better experience and better skills and better service in that area.
Yes.
That shit keeps me awake at night.
What's funny is, just backtracking about 3 minutes, you said...
Jizz.
No. You said something about the Phantom of the Opera.
The Phantom of the Opera is dead.
So the guy who is the Phantom, who played the Phantom on West End in London and in Australia, his name's Josh Pitterman, and I coach him. I work with him. Yeah, he's awesome, and he has a podcast called Behind the Mask as well, which he's just kicking off, and it's funny hearing you say that. And we talk about this mask, and we've spoken. He and I have spoken. You should get him on. I'll chat to him and see if you're interested.
I'd love to. Yeah,
he's great, mate. He's a high performer. He's a freak, but he's just a deep thinking, creative, clever, like deep. You and him will go great. I said to him the other day, we're having a coffee and talking about, I'm coaching him a bit in doing some keynote speaking, right? I said, and I said, look, sometimes you're going to be in a boardroom with, 10 people, and sometimes you're going to be, wherever in front of 1,000 people. And, but I said, what's the most you've ever sung in front of? And he goes, 92,500. And I go, all right, well, you've got me covered.
Jeez.
Like live at the
92 and
MCG.
I was going to say it'd be a big sporting event.
Yeah. Live singing in front of 92,500 people.
But I
live.
bet him singing in front of 92 and a half, it's performer.
Yes.
Yeah. And
yes.
persona, and then when he steps back into the person, I bet it scares the shit out of him thinking of standing in a boardroom, having a authentic, open, real conversation to 10 people without the metaphorical mask. So I can see exactly the utility you have for Joel.
Well, and also just on that same thing, similar thing, like I love comedy, right? I love, there ain't that much great comedy around at the moment, but I love making people laugh. I don't think I'm hilarious by any means, but I've had this secret thing to get up and just do 5 minutes of an open mic. I am more terrified of doing 5 minutes of stand-up comedy in front of 12 disinterested strangers than I am of doing pretty much anything else.
All right. Well, so you haven't done it?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not doing it.
No, listen. I registered, and regular listeners have heard this. Before I went to KPMG, I wanted to scare myself because I'd been in my comfort zone, and I enrolled in a 4-week comedy course, and the final week was at Star City, and you invited family members, friends, and you did a 5-minute open mic. I went to the first night, and they got us up on stage, and I didn't read the brief. Typical me, you'd understand this. And I just rocked up thinking they were going to talk to us. And then they said, all right, now we're going to get everyone up and just do 1 or 2 minutes. And we're going to look at the progress and we're going to film you. And I went first. He said, all right, you. And it was
I feel uncomfortable listening.
It was fucking awful. I went into some sort of keynote presentation, which is funny with context. Like I wouldn't say that I'm hilarious, but I think I'm situational funny or slapstick funny. So I know how to make a crowd laugh. I did that, and you could hear crickets, cricket, cricket. So guess what I did?
What did you do?
I didn't go back. I used the excuse that I just started at KPMG. So when you say that, I will at some stage get the balls and go back because I don't want to be a comedian, but I talk regularly as you do to people about getting out of their comfort zone. So I've got to go back and do that. So I'd love you to do it. I think it would scare the shit out of you. But there'd be a big learning in it.
Well, see, when you've got a warm audience, right, you're there and you're doing something and a group is there to hear you, right? And you're not there to be funny. Well, then you can be incidentally funny and they laugh. But people are not there for that purpose.
Yeah.
But when you're a comedian, well, make us laugh, dumbass. It's like, that's
it's
terrifying.
Such a skill. Like I've seen Lawrence Mooney probably more than any other comedian, and just so clever and deprecating and takes the piss. And you can see the theory. There's a formula there. But yeah, it scares the shit out of me, getting up on stage and doing that.
Yeah, I won't be doing it anytime soon. You can just tell us how you go.
Thank you for today.
Thanks, mate. It's been great.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
For people who want to get more of Harps, best way to find you, listen to you, where should they go?
So maybe just the You Project, which is my podcast, or I'm actually going to launch some public events in the next week or so. You can find those on my website, which is just craigharper.net. And I'm quite prolific on Instagram, which is just Craig Anthony Harper, all one word.
Good work on the public ones. Are you doing that yourself or are you doing it with a events company?
I'm doing that. Melissa, who runs my life and who's much smarter than me, she's putting all those up. So we are running them. The You Project is my company, so we're running them. I'm doing a big Melbourne workshop, Brisbane, Melbourne, and one in rural Victoria, rural-ish Bendigo, I don't know. But I'm doing a kind of a half-day workshop called Understanding You. I really like it. It's new content. I'm really excited about it. And then I do these other things where I go into state. This is a bit cheeky. I shouldn't pull back the curtain, but I'll tell you. So sometimes when I've got a corporate gig, say on a Friday, I'll go up the Thursday and I'll do what I call a private workshop for say 30 people where I'm staying. So I'll book a boardroom, and the night before my corporate gig, I'll do a 30-person private workshop 20 to 30 people. So it's small, it's intimate, and I spend about 3.5 hours with people. And it's, there's a bit of presenting, but it's more organic where people can just ask me stuff and we can go wherever we go. So I've been doing those a fair bit as well. And they're fun. I like those because it's just, it's very intimate. And I'm used to being on a stage, but it's not that.
It's probably given you a whole lot of different material as well, the reps and sets to now do the half day. So there's been method in that process.
Yes. So all that and more.
All right. Love your work, mate. Love you. And thank you for making me blush.
Love you too, big boy. It's great seeing you that shade of crimson. It was worth it just for that.
All right. Thank you very much.